So, good morning. Today on the program, the Bureau of Konstantin Vълkov, we are joined by Gerald Knaus, Austrian social scientist, co-founder and chairman of the European Stability Initiative, architect of the 2016 EU-Turkey deal, and one of the leading voices shaping debates on migration, borders, and the future of European democracy. Let me start with this. You've described the European integration project as a miracle built on trust and shared rules. But looking at today's geopolitical landscape with war in Ukraine, strains on EU unity and global power competition in a new way, how resilient is that model in 2025 and 2026? And what surprised you the most about its strengths or weaknesses?
Well, let me start with the surprise. I think what surprises me is how few people are aware that what we have in Europe, what we call the European miracle of democratic peace, is indeed a miracle, but also that this has been based on very clear thinking leading to very specific institutions being built a few decades ago and then enlarged across the continent. So it's a miracle, and that basically makes it a man-made miracle, created by people who thought hard about lessons from the first half of the 20th century and then established certain institutions, and they've survived and outlasted all the great empires. Now, what do I mean? If we look at Europe since 1990, we have 50 states in Europe at the moment. And of those, 17 experienced war, civil war, or massive repression since 1990. 33 didn't. 33, with all their difficulties, remained peaceful, had no political prisoners, had no civil war, and had no war on their territory. Now, the 33 that didn't have wars, they are all in the European Union, 25, or in Schengen, which means in the middle of the European Union, Liechtenstein, Switzerland, Norway, and Iceland. Or they are microstates, the Vatican, Andorra, San Marino, Monaco. That's it. Every country that didn't make it into the European Union or NATO or Schengen had a war, a civil war, or massive repression like in Belarus since 1990. Every single one. And the miracle then is, yes, Europe, Western Europe, and then the countries that joined, Bulgaria, Romania, Estonia, Latvia, escaped from their own past of military coups and civil war and wars with neighbors. But the contrast to the other half of Europe, which didn't manage to get integrated, is even starker. And so the institutions, of course, that were underpinning all of this, three stand out. Two major importance: European integration and NATO. European integration meaning that countries inside the EU don't fear each other at all, don't plan that they might attack each other. That's a miracle. And NATO, that we had until recently the strongest deterrent, so that no NATO member was ever attacked from the outside. This combination of internal peace between very different countries with very different traditions and external peace through deterrence is the European miracle. And now the problem in 2025 is not only that we have the biggest war since the Second World War in its fourth year, Russia's aggression on Ukraine, but that the major power in NATO, the United States, is basically signaling you can no longer rely on us. So you need to, deterrence remains the key principle, but you now need to do it yourself, which European democracies were not prepared for. And secondly, and that's the biggest threat that is new, that the United States, since the Trump White House and the MAGA movement came to power, defines itself as an ideological power in the way Truman did in 1947, only this time its ideology is the identitarian ideology. It's to support political parties in Europe that, like the White House of Trump, see the preservation of pure cultural identities and the expulsion of all those who don't fit, as a test of who is our friend and who we will defend. So the national security strategy from last week, and that was a surprise how openly it stated something that actually we saw for a year, said, you know, if European countries don't change their trajectory, we will not be able to defend them because they will no longer be European. They will have a majority non-European population, which is a bizarre concept, except you believe the identitarian myth of the great replacement, you know, mass migration, making Bulgaria majority non-Bulgarian and Germany majority non-German. And having the United States then support parties that embrace this identitarian agenda, like in Germany, which are also pro-Putin and anti-EU, which will break down the institutions that are the foundations of our European miracle, makes the United States today, for the first time since World War II, not a major supporter, but a threat to the European miracle.
Speaking of integration of neighbors and agendas, just one question about Turkey, because you helped design the deal. Was it back then morally right or just politically necessary?
Well, it depends. You know what? I suppose one needs to first say what the deal was, right? Because I think a lot of people who spoke about the EU-Turkey statement on the left and on the right didn't bother to read the 2 pages. It's only 2.5 pages.
Correct.
This statement. And so the first point to make is it's not anything. It's a statement that doesn't change a single law. So all the laws, all the conventions that apply in Europe remained. You know, the right, I mean, human dignity, the right to asylum, the right to be treated humanely, all the Children's Rights Convention, Human Rights Convention, Refugee Rights Convention, anti-torture, everything remained as it was before that statement. So the moral question is, there's no moral question because we are still tied to the same values. What was the goal? It was to stop irregular migration in line with existing EU human rights law, which includes the right to asylum. And the only way you can do that is by having a safe third country agreement. By the alternative is violence and violating human rights. That would be immoral. You know, that's the sort of Trump strategy at the border with Mexico. If you don't go down that route, but if you want to control irregular migration, and my colleagues and myself felt very strongly in September, long before this became a consensus view in Germany or elsewhere, that you needed to control irregular migration because it was not moral to see people drown in the Aegean because everybody is forced to get into a boat to reach Europe, but also politically explosive to create this image of we lose control completely of the border. We felt that in September. So in September 2015, we wrote a paper and saying, here is how Germany and Turkey and whoever wants to join them can stop the irregular migration and control it without violating refugee rights. We proposed that in September. We then went to many, many places. You know, I went to the first invitation was by the German ambassador to Turkey, so it was feeding into the German system, the foreign ministry, the chancellery, the Ministry of Interior, but all over Europe and especially in Turkey and in the Netherlands. And that played a key role because the Dutch had the presidency of the EU in early 2016, and they made our plan their strategy. So the Dutch coalition announced in January 2016 that their plan was our plan, but more importantly, the Turkish side was also convinced, and so in March 2016 the Turks presented our plan at a meeting in Brussels to the Dutch Prime Minister and the German Chancellor as a Turkish proposal. So the Dutch plan and the Turkish plan, both based on the same ideas, were both put basically on the table at the same time, and so they agreed, and so it happened. So I think if we wouldn't have had the EU-Turkey statement, we would have gone towards pushbacks, violence, brutality at the border much sooner, much quicker. I don't think, and we would have had Angela Merkel would not have won the re-election in 2017.
So two short questions. Has Germany lost control of the migration narrative, and can you really defend open societies without controlling who enters them?
Well, I think the narrative question is very, very, very interesting, because it's astonishing how lies being repeated over and over again, how effective they have become in this debate. I give you one example. The lie about Angela Merkel opening a border. You know, in September and October 2015, when hundreds of thousands of people were pouring into Germany, the external border of the EU was Greece with Turkey, and then again it was Hungary with Serbia. Those were two external borders. Neither Greece nor Hungary was able to stop anyone. Now Hungary then built a fence, but it didn't actually stop people, because until late October, people went through Croatia into Hungary, and then again from Hungary to Austria to Germany. So you could say, and it would be unfair to blame Viktor Orban, but you could say he did not control his border. Everybody who arrived in Germany arrived through the external border of the EU in Hungary. But he managed to create an impression that inside the borderless Schengen zone, a decision at the border in Salzburg between Austria and Germany, where there was no border, there was no fence, there is no border police, there are no border posts anymore, that Angela Merkel saying we will deal with those who arrive was an opening of the border. Now this is fundamental, because it makes it appear as if there was a decision in Berlin, when in fact it was a failure in Budapest or Athens that led to hundreds of thousands of people being able to cross into the EU, an external border. And this myth, Viktor Orban then turned into a story as if somehow the Germans wanted this. It was the signals from Germany which led to record number of asylum seekers. Reality is, again, second point, that the country which has taken in more refugees per capita than anybody else in the last 10 years, given more protection than anybody else, is not Germany. It's Austria. And Austria never sent the signals that Merkel sent. You know, in Austria you had Sebastian Kurz, who built his career on, I will control migration. In the Kurz years, more people got protection in Austria than in Germany. Why? Because it wasn't the signals. It wasn't the selfies. It was the reality that when you entered Austria, you were treated like EU law foresaw. So you're a Syrian, you come to Austria, you apply for asylum, you're treated.
Yes, you said a politician built his career, but is telling the truth then about migration now politically suicidal?
No, we need to tell the truth. We need to be realistic. We just must not believe the myths. So what happened the last 10 years? The last 10 years, you had a record number of refugees reaching Germany and Austria. Now, why do I stress those two countries? Because in the last 10 years, 52% of the positive asylum decisions in the European Union were given by Germany and Austria. That means they gave the protection. And for Syrians, it was 3 out of 4. Right? So this wasn't a European crisis. France didn't have many Syrians arrive. Spain didn't have many Syrians arrive. It was a crisis of, after 2016, 2 countries. Of course, they are crossing Greece. Some of them cross Bulgaria. They cross the Balkans, but they arrive essentially in 2 countries. Now, what happened in those 10 years was that you had the biggest refugee crisis in the world in decades in Syria. Millions of Syrians moving to Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan. And a total of 1.3 million Syrians in 10 years moving from Turkey to the European Union. 1.3 million who got protection in the European Union. Now, of those, just below 1 million in Austria and Germany. That's the story. So why did Syrians start leaving in such large numbers in 2015 and nobody went back? Because for 9 years, Vladimir Putin kept Assad in power. And when Assad fell in December last year, everything changed and suddenly Syrians stopped coming to Europe and hundreds of thousands of Syrians from Turkey, Lebanon and Jordan go back to Syria. Mm-hmm. So we had a major crisis in the region around Syria. We had a follow effect of this crisis affecting especially Germany and Austria, although the images, of course, were seen across all of Europe. And then we had, on top of this, in 2022, the biggest refugee crisis in Europe since the 40s, really, which is Ukraine. And both of them hit Germany at the same time. So the result was in 2022, not 2015, not 2016, 2022, Germany gave protection to more people than at any point in its history. Same is true for Austria. And the root cause of both of these major crises leading to record numbers of refugees was Vladimir Putin. I mean, this is the story. It wasn't Angela Merkel. It wasn't the selfie. It wasn't the woke left. It wasn't, a free... There are people who say we shouldn't have borders, but Angela Merkel, immediately after the people started arriving, said, I want to reduce the numbers. She said it in October. And then the search was, how do you control irregular migration in a lawful way without violating the conventions which were binding all European nations? And in the end, the EU-Turkey agreement was an answer to that question. Elsewhere, we also failed in the central Mediterranean, but this was a completely different story. This was West Africans, North Africans. The numbers were much lower. The deaths were much higher. And this we can discuss as well. But the real crisis in the last 10 years, in terms of numbers, was Syrian refugees and Ukrainian refugees. And that's how we need to talk about it, openly and without any false taboos.
Mm-hmm. So let's finish with this. They say that the migration could destroy and can destroy the European project if handled wrong. How to handle it right?
Well, I think the key is to combine two very legitimate demands of majorities of our people in almost every country. The majority of people in Germany and in Italy and in the UK want control of irregular migration. I mean, this is, you could say why, but you could also realize that's true in every country in the world. Australians want control, Canadians want control. And so if for a longer period you have large numbers of people arrive irregularly, it becomes a politically important and in the end even explosive issue if you don't have a strategy of control. So you need control. Our proposal, which we've made in the last months, again in many European capitals, is, we call it Project Zero, is to aim for zero irregular migration into the EU in 2026. But there I come to the second demand, which is the majority of the public does not actually think that people who need protection should be treated badly or their rights should be violated or people should drown by the thousands. That still, the vast majority wants humane borders. So the challenge becomes, how do you have control or zero irregular migration with humane borders? And the only answer to this that has ever worked and that we should work on now, and I can tell you why it wasn't done until now and why it is possible next year, is safe third country agreements, where we say from a cut-off date, anybody who comes from Libya to Greece or Italy, we will treat people humanely, we will rescue them from death at sea, but the asylum procedure will take place in a safe third country outside the EU. And when you credibly communicate this, after a few weeks nobody will, or very few people, 3% or so was the experience in the Aegean, will still get into a boat. And in return, Europe offers individual countries, depending on their politics, to take people, refugees, like Canada does, in an orderly way. So we control irregular migration, and we can do that next year. And the reason we can only do it next year, and we couldn't really do it in the last few years, except once with Turkey, is because EU law didn't allow it. There was a provision in EU law that said you can only make agreements with safe third countries if the people you take there have a connection to that country. That of course makes it impossible to make a safe third country agreement, because why a Bangladeshi who comes from Libya to Italy or Greece has no connection to the East African safe third country. Now this is being struck out of EU law. Last week by the Council, today the discussions start in the European Parliament with the Council. If this is gone, hopefully very soon, safe third country agreements with all the human rights provisions become possible, and in 2026, your question of what should be done, we should conclude 4 or 5 safe third country agreements for all of the major routes into the EU and prove that humane control of irregular migration is possible.
I understand. It was great to have you on the program, Gerald. Thank you so much, and I hope to hear from you again soon.
I thank you. All the best. Goodbye. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.